Hi everyone, welcome to the Australian Reptile Park. Now today I have something to show you that is probably the cutest thing you will see all year. Before I do, so you stay in there, it's not your time yet. Before I do, I just want to talk you through the story a little. And the story is a little tragic, but it's something that we should all be aware of. Now in Australia we have these wonderful things called marsupials. We all know what they are. But marsupials carry their young in a pouch. And that's nestled just inside in the middle here. Now with big things like kangaroos or even down to our small possums, sometimes, tragically, they get run over by cars. Now people should be aware of that it's a possibility, and try and avoid them, driving at those times of nights if you're in wildlife known areas. But the secondary thing is, and for kids watching, make sure you always do it with your parents. Don't if you're not with someone that's old, and that is, you can stop and check the pouch. And by doing so, you can actually rescue a little Joey in there. I've hand reared and released back to the wild so many Joeys and orphans over time through a loving family that stops and checks a pouch. So I won't keep you in suspense anymore. This little girl is a baby wombat. Now, she was in her mum's pouch, and her mum was very sadly run over by a car. But she was found and she was rescued and she was brought to us, and she's a part of our family now until we can get her big enough and strong enough and release her back to a wild or a sanctuary that still provides artificial food, and she's got some sense of coming back to home to feed if she wants, but it's the wild. Now, wombats are one of my favourite animals. Their bond with mum is second to none. So at this age, this little girl would be following her mum, running after her, playing around mum, and she's still got the security of the pouch, which she could just fit into if she needs it. But let's have a bit of a look at a wombat. Now they are a marsupial. Their closest living relative is a koala, believe it or not. A wombat lives in a burrow and a koala lives up in the trees. And they're called bulldozers of the bush because they can move so much dirt. They build these big elaborate burrows. And just have a look at that front hand. Now, not only is it gorgeous, but have a look at the shovels on it. So that front hand is really the powerhouse for digging those holes and burrows and also searching for food. And on the back feet, they're like spades. So once they've dug those burrows, they use the back foot to push the dirt out of the way. And the bottom of their hand is just beautifully soft. Now, she's been with us for a few weeks now, and as far as she's concerned, I'm mum. So that means she's in the comfort and safety. She'll play around sometimes, depending on how she feels, because she has to do a bit of exercise. And sometimes, all she wants to do is jump back in the pouch. But if I come over here, she will make her way, and in another week, wherever we run, she'll run. That's really important because mum does that at night. Right now, she's sniffing a bit of kangaroo poo. Come on. This is her bottle. Come on, come and say hello to everyone. Back here, back here. You saying hello? Now, this is her bottle, and it's an artificial milk that's very carefully constructed to suit wombats. So it's, what are you scratching me for? You want your milk. You want your milk. It's very carefully constructed for wombats, and it replicates mum's milk. But she needs that 5 times a day, and she's only just started eating solids, some sweet potatoes, some carrot. Now she's still a bit fidgety to get going, and you have to imagine that when she feeds, look at what she's just done. She's hungry, and she's putting her head like it would be in a pouch. So it's normally dark and it's secured. So whilst it might look like I'm being a bit rough, I'm not. But you've just got to cover her eyes and get that teat in. And once it's in and she's drinking, she's away. Once the hands are out of the way, there we go. Once she's drinking, she's fine. To begin with, it's really foreign for her to feed out of a pouch. And she just gets her hands in there. And her hands, which I'm holding here, she actually uses them to push against her mother's teat. And when she does that, it actually stimulates the milk flow. It's like massaging a mammary gland. And so, to begin with, we actually cut the sleeve off a jumper and we stick her in one end and her little nose pokes out the other end. It helps because she doesn't get her hands up, and it helps because she's nice and dark. But see if you can listen to these little chuckles for a minute. Tell me there's anything cuter than listening to a wombat drink milk. You look also, see on my hand, I'm actually holding her quite tight. Now the pouch is quite elastic, but she's still firmly gripped in by her mum's pouch, and she wants to be like that. If I loosen my grip, she'll get really fidgety, her hands will come up, and she's not comfortable. So like most little marsupials, they really need to be held tight. Wombats at this age can still fit under your shirt. That's where you can keep them nice and safe and warm and develop that bond. It's actually taken about 3 weeks to get her to feed like this. It was a real struggle, and for all the parents out there, I'm sure you know what it's like getting kids to eat. Wombats are no exception. The teat's foreign, the bottle's foreign, the outside's foreign. It's not mum's pouch, but she's taken to it really well. Now, she's about 6 months old, so when wombats are born, it's after a really short pregnancy that's only about a month, about 30 days. They're born the size of a peanut. They crawl up into mum's pouch and they fuse onto that teat. And then at this age is when they just start and begin to wean from mum. So the milk feeds will drop back and they won't be so regular. There'll be solids that start to come in, and to begin with, they start feeding on dry leaves and sticks and bark and things like this, because when they can get to the more palatable foods like grass, small plants and succulents, they actually take a little bit more to digest, so their stomach has to get used to that. Now, once she's finished here is my favourite time, when she will be a little milk drunk, and she loves nothing more than having her belly scratched. It's okay. So if she gets a bit unsettled, I just cover her eyes really gently, and that's normal for her. There you go. You're having a look. Now I've got more milk than she needs here, so I'll just finish her. Oh, sorry. Finish her at that for now. Now, quite interesting with a lot of marsupials is that they actually need to be toileted. Now, what does that mean? Well, they live in a pouch and they go to the toilet in the pouch. But you can imagine the bacteria and all the dirtiness that would build up if that was left in there. So what their mums actually do, and I'll just show you here. Right there, that's her pouch. Now, she's only a tiny little female. That's a little pouch, but that's the pouch. It's backward facing in wombats, otherwise it would get full of dirt when mum digs. But what mum actually does is, I guess once the joey's had a bit of a feed and mum feels that movement, mum actually puts her head down to the pouch. The joey will wiggle. It'll wiggle out and put its little bottom up. And as it goes to the toilet, mum licks it away. Now, it sounds gross, but it's very necessary, and it's something they do to keep the pouch clean. Now, wombats, like other marsupials, need to be toileted. So once they've actually been to the toilet, once they've had their bottle, you can hold your little marsupial, or in this case a little wombat, and you actually tickle the cloaca. I'm using a leaf, and you just tickle the cloaca, and that will stimulate the little marsupial to go to the toilet, because we don't want it to go into her clean pouch either. It's not good for her, and it's not a clean environment. But watch this. This is my favourite bit. When she's had a feed, she loves her belly tickles. Oh, how's that? How's that? Got her. She's all floppy. How's that? How's that? And there you have a little orphan wombat, which has a bit of a sad story, but a happy ending. And she'll need round-the-clock care for at least the next 3 months. Then her bottles will drop back to about 3 times a day. She'll be on solids by that point. And the end is that to get her back in the wild. Now, it's hard because she developed a bond with us. She's used to people and she's used to foreign environments. So to go and put her straight back into the wild is not something that we do, you know, to cut that cord. We've got a wonderful partner in Cedar Creek Wombat Rescue. Really big property that has wombats that are released, but they can come back and sleep somewhere they know. They can come back and feed. They can come back and drink water. And that's really a nice halfway house, and it really makes sure that our native wildlife like this stand a fighting chance. Now, I'm going to sit here and play with her for a minute, Hopefully a few questions have come through. Would you like to ask?
Yeah, people would like to know, how old can wombats get in the wild?
Yeah, so wombats can live over 20 years. You know, in sanctuaries, they can live a little longer simply because they've got always the presence of healthcare if needed. She's got the hiccups. Look. That's even cuter than what I said before, a wombat with the hiccups. There she goes. Now, wombats live a little longer in sanctuary because they've got all that food, water, shelter and healthcare. Life's a bit harder in the wild, but they can live over 20 years. So quite a long-lived animal, and certainly when they do get old, they're very old and wise. I really love them.
How many species of wombats are there?
There are 3 species of wombats in Australia. They're all found in Australia. Now, one is the northern hairy-nosed wombat, found up in central Queensland, critically endangered. I think there's around 200 wombats. They suffered from habitat destruction. That's mostly their problem, is that land was cleared for agriculture and there was nowhere left for wombats. They were persecuted. But there's good management there now and their future looks brighter. But noting, I mean, when you're down to 200 of any species, that's really fragile. Now, the second species is this, the common or bare-nosed wombat. And bare-nosed because its nose isn't all furry. And so they're found from Queensland through New South Wales, down into Victoria and into Tasmania. Now, the third wombat is the southern hairy-nosed wombat. That's found from Victoria across to South Australia under the Nullarbor Plains. Called a hairy-nosed wombat because they've got hair all around their nose. Now, it too is endangered. There are more southern hairy-nosed than the northern hairy-nosed wombats, but where they are, again, their population has just been annihilated mostly by habitat destruction. They fall victim to a lot of cars, and that's, you know, especially if you see a wombat behind here, and this won't hurt her, I promise. Just watch this. It's like concrete, okay? It's a really hard cartilage plate. And wombats use that historically for if things like a dingo chase them down the burrow, the wombat heads down the burrow and it blocks the burrow with that big cartilage plate, but it can also crush the skull of a dingo with it, and that's known to have happened. But the southern hairy nose, so when they get hit by cars, what happens is you've got this cartilage plate that protected the joey, so you can have a joey alive inside and a mum that's deceased. And southern hairy nose, really, especially out towards the Nullarbor, there's a lot of road fatalities. But that's the 3 species of wombat in Australia.
Is it true that wombats have square-shaped poo?
Wombats do have square-shaped poo. It's very unique, and it really does look like a cube. It's really distinctive. If you had you know, a grey kangaroo, a wallaroo, a swamp wallaby and a wombat, some of the other roo species might be hard to distinguish between, but wombat poo is always cubed. And actually what they normally do is on the outskirts of their territory, they tend to place it up on something, a log or a rock where it really stands out, and that's just putting their scent out there and marking their territory. But they sure do have square-shaped poo.
How big will she get when she's fully grown?
Yep. So right now she's a couple of kilos. A full-grown wombat can reach, a big male can reach 40 kilos. Now I think the average size is about 15 kilos, but we're talking a wombat that, you know, is twice as long, twice as high, and with that there's a lot more mass. So, you know, we talk about all the megafauna that used to cover the world. In Australia we had, you know, gigantic birds, much bigger than cassowaries and emus. We had wombats that were the size of rhinoceros. We had Thylacoleo, a marsupial lion, and we've lost all of that, you know, 50,000 years ago. But still today, to have something like a wombat in the wild, it's a big animal considering, I mean, Australia's largest native predator is a Tasmanian devil, and it's smaller than wombats. So it's quite an impressive thing to think that we've got something of this size that's out there in the bush, just getting on with what they do, being wombats.
How many times a day does she have to eat right now?
Yep, so right now, she's on an artificial milk feed 5 times a day. We've just started to increase or introduce a little bit of, look, she wants away. So she's actually, that's where she's happy. Tucked in, tight and safe and sound with her eyes closed. But she's on 5 artificial milk feeds a day, and we've just introduced some solids like lucerne chaff and wombat pellets, dry foods that won't upset her stomach and start with that digestion of solid food process.
Where would they sleep in the wild?
So wombats live in burrows. The burrows can be 10 to 20 metres long underground. They're incredible diggers and known as bulldozers of the bush. these front paws are just so strong. Look how thick that muscle is on the arm, and have a look at those, you know, each of them is a little shovel. Now on the back feet, they're like spades. You can have a scratch. The back feet are like spades, and they actually push the dirt out of the way. So they always sleep down in a burrow. They're pretty specifically nocturnal, although it's not uncommon to see a wombat really early morning or really late in the afternoon. One problem that they suffer quite massively is mange. And mange is a parasite that it was introduced with the out of there, emu. It was introduced with the feral red fox 200 years ago. Mange is just awful. The wombats normally end up dying from dehydration or starvation. And they do that because the mange parasite bites them so much, they're so itchy, they scratch themselves so often, they'll lose their fur, they go blind, they can't see, they can't hear. So if you see a wombat out through the daytime, it's normally not a good sign, and that'll normally be a wombat that's suffering pretty badly from mange.
Okay, and maybe one last question. It's the question everyone wants to know. What is her name?
You may have noticed that I haven't called her a name. And look, we have names for all of our animals. They also have microchips, and they're known by, you know, individually identifiable processes other than a name. But I haven't called her a name because she doesn't have one. We normally wait a few weeks to name an animal. First of all, you want to know that it's going to survive. We have no control over the condition they arrive to us in. You know, how long they've been in the wild, what type of condition they're in. And so that point we've reached. But just with everything that's going on at the moment in the world, we thought it might be a lovely process to let you name her. We can only pick one name. Please send them through in the comments. And if you'd like to, a little bit of foresight is try and pick a name with meaning that has some cultural significance, or that has some meaning to the wombats as a species or their role in the environment. But it's over to you. Hit us with your names and we will give her one that appropriately fits this beautiful little wombat. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you again another day.